Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Unveil the Future, the podcast series by the Win Future Foundation. I'm your host s4e7v, Marketing and Communications Specialist at the Win Future Foundation, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Before we begin, we would also like to share that the nominations for the Win Future Prize 2027 are now officially open. We warmly invite the global scientific community to help identify and honor innovations capable of improving lives on scale. If you are considering a nomination, please scan the QR code displayed on the screen. Thank you. Around the world, countries are no longer asking whether climate change should be addressed, but how quickly science, technologies, policies, and industry can work together to build practical solutions. And perhaps, more importantly, how emerging economies like Vietnam can become active contributors to that global transformation. Our guest today has spent her career working precisely at that intersections. Please join me in welcoming Professor Evelyn Wang, an international recognized engineer, energy innovator, and scientific leader. She currently serves as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's inaugural Vice President for Energy and Climate, leading the MIT Climate Project. Prior to this role, she served as the Director of the U.S. Advanced Research Projects Agency, Energy, or APRA-E in short, where she led high-risk and high-reward energy research and innovations program. Professor Wang is widely recognized for her pioneering research in high-efficiency energy and water systems. Her innovations have been recognized by the MIT Technology Review, Scientific American, and the World Economic Forum for their breakthrough potential in sustainable technologies. Beyond her scientific achievements, Professor Wang is a member of the National Academy of Engineering in 2025, a Fellow of American Associations for the Advancement of Science in 2021, a Fellow of American Academy of Arts and Science in 2023, and a Fellow of the American Society of Mechanical Engineering in 2015. Professor Wang, thank you so much for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you here in Vietnam.
Thank you.
Yeah, how are you today?
Good. I just landed in Vietnam today, so I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad to hear that. So your current role as a Vice President for Energy and Climate is a brand new position for MIT. And you are leading a major new initiative called the Climate Project. So for people outside the university, how do you explain what this initiative is trying to do differently than traditional academic research?
Sure. So the Climate Project is a new initiative, as you said, at MIT. And this is really set by the vision of our president, Sally Kornbluth, where she had stated that MIT, with our partners, is working towards changing the trajectory of global climate outcomes in the next decade. So within a decade, we're going to work towards doing something transformational. So not business as usual at MIT, but really working with now collaborators at our campus, but also holistically across the world to actually drive this impact. And so the Climate Project, in fact, I think very much resonates with what I heard today, is to really build well-being. And when we say build well-being, it's about people and the planet. So we can create our futures. And so instead of the doom and gloom that typically has been how it's painted in terms of climate change, is we can actually create an optimistic outlook for many generations ahead. So that's what the Climate Project is about.
As part of the work with the MIT, you have argued that we need to pivot the framework towards creating community well-being. So what changed for researchers when they design for human thriving rather than designing out of climate anxiety?
Well, first, I'll just say that when you want to build for human thriving or building well-being, as we're saying, is that you can't just say there's going to be a single technology or a single policy or a new framework to do that. You actually have to be able to bring these pieces together, right? Because climate change itself is a system. It is a system of systems problem as we think about the future. So when we address climate change, we have to think about a holistic approach. And we also have to think about when we're developing the solutions, what are the impacts on other parts of the system? Because we know that these systems are highly interconnected in nature. So if you're developing just an energy solution, a typical one that often people are talking about is, say, biofuels. But the problem with biofuels is the fact that you need to now deforest land often to create your biofuels, right? So there are these trade-offs that need to be considered. So as we're developing the solutions, we have to think about an integrated approach and the innovations and the impacts of these innovations across the whole system.
Thank you for sharing that. And moving on to the reflections on Vietnam and its global role. So what makes Vietnam an increasingly important partner for global science, technology, and innovation? Like why Vietnam and why now?
Well, this is my first time in Vietnam today, and I just really had a great conversation with the VIN group, with leaders from VIN University, just learning about this ecosystem and how exciting this is a time to be in Vietnam, because the economy is really now booming, and really there is so much that's happening around us as we see new infrastructure being built, electrification of vehicles that are happening thanks to VinFast. Now the rail, that's high-speed rail that's getting built, as well as all these other exciting things that are happening in education here at VIN University. And I think that just highlights what Vietnam is doing and also the future for this country and the impacts for the world. And I think that's what's really exciting, and that's what I heard about, and now I get to see it firsthand as to the possibilities for our future. And that's why I'm excited to be here and be a part of this and identify ways to collaborate.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. So Vietnam has emerged as one of Asia's fastest growing economies while pursuing ambitious sustainability and net zero goals. So what role can Vietnam play in shaping the next chapter of global economic growth and sustainable development?
And I think we're seeing it, as I just mentioned. We're starting to see how Vietnam is emerging as such a central leader in this region and expanding out to the world. And at MIT, I would say that the sustainability aspect, addressing climate change, energy challenges, these are all very resonant with what we're hearing here. And the ability for Vietnam to do things at such a fast speed, accelerating the deployment of solutions, being able to innovate much more openly because of the fact that they can start from a point by which it didn't exist before. And you can actually create a future that does not exist today because of the ability to do everything here, to actually start to innovate, to actually drive the manufacturing, to build the infrastructure and get it deployed at scale and translating it. And I think that's what really excites me because of what we do at a university, like at MIT, whereby we are innovating, but we also need a partner to actually translate these innovations out to scale, to the market, to actually make impact.
You have also had the opportunity to learn more about the VIN Future Prize and its missions of science for humanity. What is your impressions of this initiative, and why do the global platforms of this scale matter today?
Yeah, VIN Futures is certainly very inspiring to me, and I think the VIN Future Prize in particular in thinking about science for humanity. Science is so fundamental to how we can actually innovate and transform our future. And right now, actually, science is sometimes in question as to what is the value of science. And I think what VIN Prize does is really spotlights the importance of science and how that science can ultimately lead itself to these really valuable, impactful things that we all need. And I think that's what the VIN Prize is about. It's also about kind of supporting the next generation of leaders to innovate. And I think that is what we need more of, and that's what's so exciting.
So beyond recognizing outstanding scientific achievements, what role can a global prize like VIN Future play in connecting scientists across the borders and helping breakthrough ideas move closer to real-world impact?
Well, I just talked about the spotlight of the prize and the importance of science, but I think it also spotlights the people and how they can actually now become leaders and access more of the world in terms of other researchers, other leaders in energy, sustainability, robotics, AI. And I think that's what the opportunity is, to create the connectivity with this prize to the global ecosystem for innovation and for science and the future.
I agree with you on that. So one of the biggest challenges in science is moving great ideas from laboratories into society. So based on your experience at MIT and ARPA-E, what does it take to successfully transfer promising technologies and intellectual capitals across borders and deploy them in countries such as Vietnam?
So innovation is core to often universities. And one thing I've learned through my time as an innovator, as a researcher, and then also leading an agency focused on innovation, is that one of the key things is actually figuring out what exactly is the problem. The problem definition ultimately is almost more important than first coming up with a solution. Because then, once you have a problem definition, you can inspire the researchers, the scientists, to really come up with innovative solutions to work towards a real problem. I often see with early innovators is that you have essentially a hammer and you're looking for a nail. So you have an idea, you're like, oh, this is really cool, this is very novel. But what they don't understand is, does it really matter? And so when you're defining the problem first, you can really define what exactly is the bottleneck. How do you actually then unlock that bottleneck with a solution? And sometimes the more traditional solutions are not the way to then leapfrog to now something that could be truly transformational. And so problem definition, but how do you get that problem? The problem actually has to now emerge from understanding the space. This is where industry comes in. This is where government comes in. This is where philanthropy comes in, where understanding different facets of kind of the holistic problem to identify some of the key bottlenecks and working with others to then figure out what is the solution is really key in all of this.
So what would be needed to create stronger pathways for world-class research and technologies from MIT and the broader global scientific community to be tested, adapt, and scale in Vietnam?
Well, one thing I just heard about is the opportunity for living labs. I think while in a lab, in a typical research lab, you could do something at a small scale. You can test something and say, in the lab, it works. But when you start to think about real world now, will it really work in these practical conditions? And this is where we heard already that there's so much opportunity for Vietnam and places in these areas to serve as living labs, by which you can start to pilot on the ground real solutions and demonstrate the viability. Because we know with innovative technologies, there are many valleys of death, if you will, in terms of now ultimately getting this technology out to scale. And piloting is a key piece of it, to demonstrate that it's not just technologically feasible, so it works, but can the technical and economics work? Can it actually work with the policy frameworks in place? And all of these things matter such that it can be financeable, it can be durable over time with the policies, that actually it can be reliable with the technology. And that's where I think there's a lot of exciting collaborations that can happen, as well as relying on a much more resilient supply chain, manufacturing, to actually then get it to scale.
So speaking of scientific collaborations, it must also have to be a two-way exchange. So how can global institutions and scientific networks better support Vietnamese researchers, especially for young scientists, in gaining international exposure, building global partnerships, and of course, bringing their ideas to the world?
So as a professor for almost 20 years, I would say one of the most important things is having exchange amongst young people all around the world. And I would say that some of the best ideas come from these cross-cultural, cross-disciplinary engagements with researchers from other places in the world coming to MIT, us sending researchers and students to different countries to understand what are the challenges. And like I said before, the challenges are not often understood until you can actually see things firsthand, understand the cultural context, understand the environmental limitations, the geographic limitations. These all matter. And these are the things that cross-cultural, international exchanges can enable to support the young researchers early on so that they can become future leaders that can appreciate the challenges, but also now tackle problems that actually have relevance to the world.
Looking beyond this visit, what would a meaningful long-term bridge between MIT and the global scientific community and Vietnam look like to you? And what concrete outcomes would you hope to see in the years ahead?
So I'm already inspired by this trip. I will say that it gives me great optimism because of what I heard today, being here, and the optimism that we share in terms of building our future. And I think that comes with what I hope to see with collaborations and close partnerships with MIT, Vinh University, Vinh Futures, Vinh Group generally, to be able to now enable, as we just talked about, exchanges between students, researchers, professors, just partners in general, and being able to now share ideas so that we can work towards addressing the big problems that we all face, whether it's sustainability and AI and climate change and energy and the environment. We can do this together. So what I hope to do in my time and here today, as well as in the future, is continue to cultivate relationships, partnerships, create and work together so that we can build our future across the many ecosystems, across the different challenges, so that we can all live in the future, enable our generations ahead to live the futures that they want.
Professor Wong, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Your insight reminds us that the solving climate change is not simply about developing better technologies. It is also about connecting disciplines, institutions, countries, and people.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Today's conversations also highlights that Vietnam has an important opportunity not only to adopt innovation, but to become an active contributor to the global scientific progress. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us for this special episode of the Unveil the Future Season 4. Please stay connected with us through our official website and social media platforms for more conversations with leading scientists and innovators from all around the world. And once again, nominations for the Vinh Future Prize 2027 are now officially open. We warmly invite the global scientific community to take part in recognizing innovations capable of creating meaningful impact for humanity. If you are considering a nomination, please scan the QR code displayed on the screen. Thank you. Until next time, and goodbye.